Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Rabbi Benjamin Adler, the rabbi here at Adath Israel congregation. We are so excited to welcome you to our Sacks-Wilner Holocaust education program. Whether you're here in our sanctuary or those on Zoom, we welcome you as well. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. Please, if you do have a cell phone, if you could silence it and put it away. Second, in case of an emergency, just want to let you know the quickest way is to exit our building. So when we're here in the sanctuary, there is an exit to my left, to your right, that will take you into hallway, but immediately to the left after you go through those doors, you can exit our building. There's also an exit to my right and your left that will take you again down a hallway that you can exit the building. When we're in the social hall, there are exits in the social hall, 4 doors that take you outside in case of any emergency. Of course, it's not going to happen, but want to make sure that you're aware of those. A number of people I'd like to thank for our program today. First, like to thank Linda and Steve Gallen for their dedication to educating everyone, not just Jews, but non-Jews as well, about the Holocaust and setting up this program. We're grateful for the commitment that you made to create this program over 15 years ago. I want to thank Laurel Cantor for her graphic design, Bernice Abramovich for her PR work, Amanda Arena for helping with all kinds of preparations for today, and to Judy and Rolando Archila for their help with our dessert reception. Also want to acknowledge Stephen Sacks-Wilner, who is with us here today and part of the Sacks-Wilner family. I want to make a special mention as well of Rabbi Daniel Grossman of blessed memory, who was instrumental in bringing the Sacks-Wilner program here to Adath, and to Hedda Morton, who ran the program for many, many years and established a wonderful foundation. We take a moment as well to honor the inspiration for our program this afternoon, Dr. Arthur and Mrs. Esther Sacks-Wilner. Arthur and his brother Erwin were partners in the practice of medicine, EENT, and longtime members of Adath Israel congregation. During World War II, Erwin was deployed as a medic to Europe. Arthur remained in the US to treat the returning soldiers, and his interest in the Holocaust began at that time. During his lifetime, Arthur received commendations from President Harry Truman, President Lyndon Johnson, and President Richard Nixon. He was also honored with the State of New Jersey Joint Legislative Resolution by Senator Shirley Turner, as well as then Assemblyman, now Mayor of Trenton, Reed Gassiora, and then Assemblywoman and former Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman. Arthur had a wonderful life and a wife who supported whatever he did fully. It's due to Esther Sacks-Wilner that we have the Holocaust education program. She made it clear that she wanted Arthur's name to live on, and it certainly has in the 50 years of Holocaust education programs that have been given in their names. A note about our program: we're going to begin with a presentation by our speakers, and then later there'll be time for questions. Those in the sanctuary can raise their hands, and we'll repeat the questions for those on Zoom. Those who are on Zoom can send their questions into the chat, and we can read the questions that come in. We're pleased to welcome today Mark Schonwetter and his daughter Ann Arnold, and they will of course be telling more of their story, but I just want to give a brief introduction. Mark was born in Rostek, Poland, to farm owners, Israel and Sala Schonwetter. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, Mark was a 5-year-old boy living happily and comfortably with his younger sister, Zosia, on the farm that the parents owned. During the war, they hid in attics, barns, underground, as they'll explain, also with kind Polish people who allowed them to be on their property. After the war, Mark, along with his mother and sister, stayed in Poland and lived under the communist regime until 1957, at which time they had the opportunity to immigrate to Israel. But making a living there was difficult. So after 4 years, Mark reached out to his family in America and was sponsored to come to the United States. With the help of family, he obtained work at a jewelry factory, sweeping floors, working hard to learn English. And within 5 years, he rose to become a factory manager. And in 1971, had the opportunity to purchase a wedding ring manufacturing company of his own. Over the next 40 years, Mark grew the manufacturing company Lieber Farm Inc. into a successful nationally branded wedding ring and bridal brand. Now in retirement, Mark has dedicated his time to speaking with students and adults about his life's journey. Most recently, his daughter Anne, along with her sister Isabel Fisk, created the Mark Schonwetter Holocaust Education Foundation in honor of their father. She is the CFO of H. Arnold Wood Turning, Inc., a premier supplier of wood products and the chief strategy officer of Big Buyers Intelligence Group, which provides comprehensive, scalable industry solutions that deliver dramatically improved performance to jewelry retailers and manufacturers. One of her greatest accomplishments has been the publishing of Together, A Journey for Survival. In September of 2016, she was awarded the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Heroes for Tolerance Award. She speaks to people of all ages all over the country and has written a lesson plan to accompany the book, which is now being used in many schools, and we will have an opportunity to purchase the book after our program. Please join me in welcoming Mark Schonwetter and Anne Arnold.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm gonna step up a little bit so I can see everybody better. Thank you so much, Rabbi, and thank you all for coming, and those on Zoom also for attending today. We're really excited to be here and share a little bit of the highlights from my dad's journey. And as we said, we love the questions and answers, so please feel free at the end. My dad's great. He will answer anything. So really, whatever you would like to ask him. So I always start by saying, how many here have actually, or how many here are a survivor? Are there any other survivors in the room? And how many other people know a survivor? What? You know, Simon Wiesenthal used to start all of his talks in the United States by reminding everybody, you see, there's only one reason why Jews are alive today. It's because Hitler lost the war. Because if Hitler didn't lose the war, as he went and invaded country after country, he would have said, give me all of your Jews. And just like they did throughout World War II, they would have given Jews up to the Nazi regime. And it's only because Hitler was defeated that there's even a Jew alive today. So really, all Jews are survivors. So I'm going to ask again, how many survivors do we have in the room? And how many people know of a survivor? It totally changes your perspective on things. I'm actually a CPA by trade, and I never really thought of myself as a writer. But back when I was in high school, in my closet and in my room, I used to jot down and write some poems. And I'm going to start today with one of those poems. Those of you who feel you are not affected are affected the most. Those of you who feel it did not happen to you will experience it the most. Those of you who don't want to remember will have the most terrifying nightmares. Those of you who think it never happened will live through it again. You know, there's a statement we all hear, never forget. Well, never forget for me has two meanings. Number one, we must never forget what happened. We must tell the story. We must make sure our children know the story and tell their children. But never forget for me has a second meaning. We must never forget that even in the most horrible, darkest times of history and in what happens in our lives, there is goodness, and goodness can prevail if we allow it. And it's because of that goodness that I'm even standing here today. It's only because of the goodness of a few that saved my family am I able to say that I can stand here and tell you this story. If you may, just to give you a little bit of context, this is a map of Poland. And for those that can't see the map, my father's from a tiny little village called Brzostek, which is in the southeast part of Poland. The little village was surrounded, and on the map, you'll see skull and crossbones, by a bunch of concentration camps. You may have heard of some of them. Auschwitz is one that most people know of. And it's in those forests and woods that my dad survived. Now, this little village my dad was from had 1,500 families that lived, people that lived in it prior to the war. 500 of them were Jewish. It was a very vibrant Jewish community. As you heard, my grandfather was a landowner. He was a farmer. He was also the head of the Jewish community. And of those 500 Jewish families, by the end of the war, and by most accounts, less than 10 of them were still alive, 3 of which was my grandmother, my father, and my aunt. We don't have many pictures of my dad from the early years. We have a few of him when he was a young child, and I think that this is the one where we see his house. And I was able to visit where he was from and the town that he was from and where he grew up. And my first time visiting was in the early 90s. And when I went, there was an attic I remember going into, and this is a picture of us going into that attic. And you see, I always remembered the story of this attic. I had been knowing bits and pieces of my dad's story my whole life. And I remember hearing about this attic. And when we got there, my dad took my sister and I up, and he said, there, that's where it happened. And you see, I remember hearing about how he was hiding in that attic one day and started to hear footsteps coming up the ladder. And my grandmother quickly took her 2 children and she buried herself under the hay and put her hands over their mouth and said, shh, not a word. And my grandmother quickly, as she was hiding there, made sure they were very still. But you see, there was a pitchfork on the side of the bar of the attic. And when the Nazi got up to the attic, my father said he'll never forget the sound. The sound was the swooshing sound of that pitchfork going into the hay, because they figured if someone was hiding, surely they would hit them. They got really lucky that day. They escaped that. And as amazing as that trip was, it was my second trip back to Poland that changed my life forever. You see, there was this professor from England, Professor Weber, who had traced his genealogy back to this little tiny village of Brzostek. His family had left long before the war had ever started, but he wanted to find out where his roots were from. So he went and he found this little village. And when he found out it had been destroyed by the Nazis, he went to the mayor of the town and said, I would like to reconsecrate the Jewish cemetery. Right now is just a plot of land. But what had happened was, as some may know, when the Nazis would come in and destroy anything Jewish, they used the headstones as masonry work in people's homes. It was in their driveways, in their gates, things like that. The mayor agreed. They found out that we were my dad was still alive and that we were survivors from that town, and invited us to come back to the town for this day. And the day started where we pulled up to that house where my dad was from. And my cousin, who had never been there before, we were showing her the house. And these people came from across the street. And they said, are you the Schonwetters? We're in a part of Poland. I'm talking like horse and buggies were being used in 91. And we're all like, who knows us? And so my dad goes, yes. They're like, we remember you. We played with you when we were children. And then they almost like they were purging their souls. And we remember when they used your house and they separated the Jews, and then they looked at each other and they said, remember when that man, he ran away? And they point to the street and they said, and right here, They beat him. Do you remember? They beat him. And they told us that if we would help him, that we would be murdered also. And we had to wait for 3 days watching him die in the street. That's how my day started. I'm a crier. Needless to say, I used a lot of tissues that day. But we then went into the center of town, and there was a plaque that they had put up on Town Hall. And it's difficult to see there, but the plaque basically commemorated the fact that there were any Jews that had ever lived in this town. You see, in 1942, when they exterminated the village, not one Jew has lived there since. No one survived or came back. And on Town Hall, they placed a statement in memory of the Jewish community of Justek, its rabbis, teachers, shopkeepers, and artisans, and all families in memory of 500 Jewish men, women, and children of Justek murdered in 1942 in the Pojami Forest, in the Bezek death camp, and other unknown places. And I couldn't believe it. They were actually acknowledging that we existed, that we were there. This particular town halls where the jail cell was housed. It was where they would bring the Jews and let them go. But it was about 40 townspeople that came out to witness this. And I couldn't believe so many people came out and cared. But what really amazed me is when they said, let's go to the cemetery now. And we walked down this beautiful, like picturesque street and turned the corner. And you'll see, as we turned the corner, there was this huge tent that had been erected. Over 600 townspeople had come out that day to witness the reconsecration of the Jewish cemetery. They had the head rabbi from Poland, as well as the head priest from the local community. They put on performances for us. We found out the townspeople had heard about this project and anonymously started to take chisels and take out anything with Jewish lettering from their driveways and from their walls to bring back to the cemetery so that they could put back together headstones. And they recovered 33 headstones, one of which was my great-grandfather's. They were allowing us to put a headstone up for my grandfather. And my father said Kaddish for the first time for his father. And if that wasn't enough, they put us on coach buses and took us to the local high school, where these kids went and Googled how to make authentic Jewish food, created a buffet for us 20 feet long, along with a section that they had for kosher for those that were kosher in the group that we were with. And they went and learned how to sing Hebrew songs and put a concert on for us, singing Hava Nagila, Shalom Aleichem. I mean, my aunt is still living in Israel, and she said, I think they were singing better than half the kids in Israel sing. It was amazing. And all day, I had one thought going through my mind. What's in it for them? Come on. It can't really be this good, right? There's got to be an ulterior motive, right? Because I grew up pretty cynical. I grew up knowing that my family was murdered simply because our God had a different name, simply because we looked different than most Poles. But I couldn't find that answer all day. And I had my mother go with me up to the mayor and translate for me to thank him for what he had done. And I said, I want to thank you for giving me a place to bring my children back to. And he stopped me, he says, I don't want your thanks. There is no thanks necessary. This was the only thing to do and the right thing to do. And as corny as it sounds, I was changed. It changed this. It gave me this renewed faith in mankind that I didn't feel I had my whole life. And it motivated me to come back. A lot of my family here in America had never even known about my dad's story. And it got me to start saying, it's time for me to get his story down. And I started with a blog where I literally bothered my father every week for 6 months, peppering him, question after question after question. And we wrote a blog, which eventually turned into the book. And from there, started speaking in schools, which eventually led us to realize that schools don't have funding to learn about this history. They don't have the funding to bring in books or to bring in a survivor to speak or go see a museum or bring in any kind of project that has to do with the Holocaust. And that's what motivated us to start the foundation. And now we raise money and give grants to schools so that schools all over the country could start to learn the lessons of the past. Because you see, we've made it our life mission to go out and speak to as many people as possible, to remind them there's goodness. You don't have to just listen to the news and hear about all the anti-Semitism and bigotry and racism that exists out there. You have a choice. Our choice is to spread the message of be kind to one another, love each other, respect each other. Because if we could get that message out, especially to the youth, then we're hoping that our voices are going to drown out those voices of violence and hatred one day. But it's all up to us to make that decision. So I'm going to leave you with another poem that I wrote back in those days in my closet when I really wasn't a writer. The question who, the answer me. The question where, the answer here. The question how, the answer within. The question when, the answer now. The question what, the answer never forget. So with that, I'd like to introduce my father, who's going to take you through his time, and then I'll be back up and we'll get to some questions and answers. Dad?
Good afternoon, everybody. Invitation, really appreciate that. Thank you to all of you for being here and giving me the opportunity to share with you my journey to survival during the Holocaust. Poland, small little, call it town, armies, Polish people helping them in work on a farm. And I'm going to say it in the beginning. Gave this family 2 rooms in our house for the convenience for them to work and for my father to have a right on the property. The name of the family was Piwat. I am mentioning that because during my survival, they were a lot helping us. The war broke out. It took Germans 3 weeks and they conquered Poland. The German army happened to go through, some soldiers through our village. For me as a small little child, to see tanks, trucks full with German soldiers. Notice planes in the air. Never saw anything like it in my life, though I was little. So I even asked my mom, what kind of birds are those birds flying so here? She said, no, they're not birds. They're planes. Who knew what a plane is? But Poland, in the beginning, if our life and the farm, my parents, was normal, continued to be the same, like nothing happened. But unfortunately, this thing didn't last too long. After a few months, the Gestapo came in to town. They went to the police station and they start asking them how many Jews are in town, what they do, and so far. Then they came again, and they came again, asked questions. So finally, the chief of police tells them, you know what? There is this gentleman, Schonwetter. He's the head of the Jewish community here. You're asking me questions, I answer you, but maybe there are some more questions in reference to the Jewish population. He may know more than I do. So maybe you should talk to him. So they say, oh, it's not a bad idea. Let us go and talk to him. So from this point on, they used to come to our house and asking him all kinds of different things about the Jewish population. They came and they told them, we have to impose certain rules for the Jewish people here. What we have to do first, to make sure, you make sure that all the Jewish people a band on their arm with the Star of David. Okay, it was imposed. Soon after that, they came back and they said, well, what we need to do, you notify all the Jewish people who have small kids and they go into public school, that they will not go anymore to school. They're not allowed. Done. Then finally they came and they told my father, your property, your house, everything, we need this. You find yourself a room in town. Here you're allowed to take with your only personal belongings. So my father went. He rented a house in a Polish family house, and we moved there. So from this point on, if they needed him for any reason, they called him to the police station. So he went, few hours, whatever time he spent there, came back home. Call him, and he's not back. Nothing she could do. Here's somebody knocking on the door. So when she opened the door, she's looking. The wife of this police chief. Mom, I happened to overhear a conversation between the Gestapo and my husband. And they were telling him that soon they're taking all the Jews out from here. I don't know where they take him, what is going to happen, but doesn't sound too good. I would suggest take your two little kids and escape from here. And she left. Mom didn't know what to do. Late in the evening, she got scared, of course. So she decided to take two of us, me, my sister, and we're going back to our old house, to the Piwat family. And Mom tells them, Here is what I heard. Can you help me? Can you guide me? Can you tell me where to go, what to do? So he says to her, well, it's so late in the evening. Sleep. Tomorrow morning, we sit down and we figure out something. So you go too, because I don't have place. She sent her to a cousin. And him, pointing at me, let him sleep with my kids here. I bring him tomorrow morning, and we're going to sit down and make a decision what to do. I went to sleep. Next morning, very early in the morning, the door opens and the Gestapo walks in. To his bed, they waking him up, and they say, we were told that the Schonwetter family is in your house. Where are they? Schonwetter's here. And he says, look, I have people with me. We're going to search the property. You're not cooperating. When we're going to find them, which we will, them and you and kill them. So where are they? He says, you're more than welcome, go and look. I'm telling you, there is no Schonwetters here. Search the property. So they walking out. Then he stops by the door, turns around, he looks at the kids. And one of them happened to be the oldest daughter. Okay, you. How many brothers and sisters you have? Tell me quick, quick, quick. So he goes, he counts. 8 kids. So he walked out. Well, let me tell you now, I was the luckiest kid in the world that she was smart enough to include me in the count of her brothers and sisters. Because I don't think I'll be standing here today and talk to you. Comes and he says to the kids, get up, get dressed, go outside, keep yourself busy with whatever you want. And he tells me, and you, go with them out, go behind the house, hide yourself between the bushes there, don't come back to the house. Just sit there, I will come and I take you to your mom. Just wait for me. And that's what happened. I was sitting there for a while. He came, he took me, we went to mom. And he tells her, look, I see the situation. It's not a good thing. What I think, for you the best thing would be if you go to a ghetto. I know there is this ghetto in this town. He would suspect that you went there. They won't go there and look for you. Find yourself a room somewhere there and live there. All the Jewish, I know it's quite a few Jewish people live in this ghetto. The situation, that's what you're suggesting, you feel it's fine? Okay. So we walked from our little village to this town. The name of the town was Dębice. It was about 15 miles that we walked to the town, came in. He says, okay, here you, the guards here, they will let you in, go and find yourself a place. And that's what we did. Walked into the ghetto and started walking around the streets, looking for a place to live. We see people living on a street. Every house my mom walks in, it's full with people. For I don't remember how many hours. Finally, she found a little tiny spot on the attic of one of the houses. And she says, okay, we're going to stay here. And we start living. While we were walking so long, and finally got this little spot there, me and my sister were so hungry because we didn't eat anything. And we start crying and asking her for food. Have anything. So she goes to another person next to us and she's asking, can you tell me where I can go and get some food for my kids? So the person looks at her and tells, well, yeah, I can tell you, you better wait. When they call us, we go and they give us food. That's the food you get. That was it. Finally, they announced to go down, go outside. We went, we see a big line. We stay in the line. Finally, we got to the table where they were giving the food out. So they give us a cup and they say, here's soup. Actually, it was water which had some color in it, nothing else, just warm water. You made another step, they gave you a slice of bread. From this moment on, every day, we stood in line, and that's the food we were getting. So you can imagine, for the amount of food that we were getting, we were constantly hungry, day and night hungry. This, where we lived, or any other houses, they didn't have water. Clothes to change. We were just living day by day in the same clothes. Only outside you found a spot, and that was the toilet there. Lying on the street. Like pulling a little wagon, there were people, and taking the bodies, throw them in, and going away, take it someplace. Horrible. It was horrible. But there was no any other way to do anything. For about 3 months. A little boy comes in and he tells to my mom, there is somebody there here asking if we know a Schonwetter, asking people. And I heard them asking, I know you, come on, I'll show you where he is. So mom goes and he sees who is there, Mr. Piwat. Listen, go get your 2 kids, make it fast here, and I show you how to escape from here. Mom ran, she brought me, my sister. He tells her, okay, I am throwing a blanket over the barbed wire on the top of the fence. You pick up a kid and throw him over. I will catch him that side. Mom looks at him, he says, I don't think I can do it. Strength, I am weak. No way I can pick up and throw it. He says, yes, you can. You're strong enough, you can do it. Besides, take a look at those two little kids. They are skin and bone. There's no weight there. You can throw them. Just do it. Do it and make it fast. We don't have time here. Mom did it. She did throw. Then he says, you climb and you jump over, I catch you. And she did. And that's how we got out from the ghetto. He took us to a little house next on the outside. He had clothes. And he says, you change your clothes because I knew you're not going to have fresh clothes because they smelly and dirty. You cannot go on a street like that in town. We changed and we walked out from the town. Going to take you to a village and with one of the farmers there, and they will take you. So we walked again there, went to the village. When we came in, house says to Mom, I see you have two little kids. But to be aware that those kids are not allowed to talk, to laugh, to cry. They have to be quiet, constantly quiet. Make them be quiet? Mom said, definitely. Okay, go on the attic. There's a lot of hay there. Stay between the hay, cover yourself, and you're going to sit there day and night. You're not going out, you're not going downstairs, any place. You just sit there. I bring you food. No sound. We were sitting in this house through the whole, happened to be when we got there was already fall. So through the whole winter, we were sitting in there. When the spring came, she says to Mom, I cannot hold you any longer. You have to go and find yourself a place, someplace. My Mom says, I don't know where to go. I don't know anybody. Can you recommend? Where should I go? So I'm not going to talk to anybody and tell them that I know you even. I suggest, you see behind my house here, it's a very big forest. Why don't you go into the forest, find yourself a spot there, summer is coming, it'll be warm, and you live in the forest. Oh, and that's what we did. Mom took us, we went to the forest, we found ourselves, found a spot between bushes. Says to us, well, we will have to think about some food because we need to eat. There are certain items grow in the forest. Them, and why we find them, why we look for them, when we find them, I'm going to teach you which ones are eatable and which ones are not. Cross mushrooms, good. Those are good. Then we found different mushrooms, and they were poison mushrooms. So he says, you see those here, those you're not supposed to eat because you get sick. berries or anything else. She was teaching us slowly, slowly. We became expert and we know which one to pick and which one to eat. And basically this was the food that we ate while we were hiding in the forest. We were lucky that we found a little stream of water in our place, so we had some water. Maybe once in 2 or 3 months, Mr. Piwat came in and he brought us some bread. Asking the woman, and she told them, we in the forest here. Well, when the fall came, winter started, was cold, we couldn't stay any longer in forest. Mom decided in the evenings, only evenings, we're going to walk, look, and talk to some farmers, maybe somebody will take us. When we came in to a farmer, Mom says to us, you sit here and wait, I am going to go and talk. But just wait here, don't move. So when she talked to the farmer, depends of the conversation, if she accept their called invitation to keep us, we walked in and we stayed there. In case she didn't like the way they were talking, she came out and said to us, let's get out of here quick, let's get out of here quick. So in between, if we couldn't find a spot, place behind the village somewhere, behind a tree, rest of the night, and the whole next day, we were sitting in snow. If it was snow, and most of the time there was snow, cold, and no food. Then waiting till the evening, again walking around, and then we got lucky, people would take us in for a week or 2. And that's how we survive a winter. Summer came, went back to the forest, and we lived in the forest. And looking for a place to live. So we came to a farmer, and Mom is asking him, and he says to her, well, if I decide to take you and hide you here in my house, I have to make sure to be hidden here, and I have to make a place that would be not so easy to realize that you're hiding there. Come back in a day or so. And he takes us to a pigsty. Mom, take a look. I dig a hole here, but it's very shallow. Sit here. Maybe you can only lay down and that's it. Comfortable this way, I take you. Mom says, makes no difference for me. I don't have to sit or stay or live. It's fine. So he says, okay, go in. Then lay down. He goes, he takes a pieces of wood, he covers the whole top. Then we hear him putting hay on top of it. And then we hear the pigs inside. We got a little scared in there because we heard them jumping, but quiet down. And that's how we lived through the whole winter, happened to. Never go out from there, always laying. And you know, for things. So what, we couldn't walk or anything. So we were like rolling over one another to a corner. We did our share, what we needed, go back to the place and lay. Pigs on top of us, their share of this. And these things were sometimes dropping inside on top of us. We complained to Mom. Always were positive on everything. She always had such a nice, positive outlook on everything. Finding us, you see, it's nothing. Winter, lay in the snow, cold, freezing, no food. This is good. So you feel a little bit, doesn't smell good, so, but that's okay. You'll be okay, you'll survive. Again, we went to the forest. All of a sudden we start hearing explosions, shooting. Like the German army is moving around here. Too much sound, too much things. Then we see farmers, group of 15, 20 people walking and escaping from this area where the sound was coming. Well, next time we're going to see a group of people like that. We're going to follow them, and wherever they go, we're going to go. There are some places there, farmers are going to take them and they take us. A group, we follow them, and when she started thinking about it, she was telling us, remember, I'm giving you now Polish names. Your name is so, my name is, remember, don't talk to people, don't tell them who we are, what we are, tell them we're running away from the front, that's all what you can say. When we be living with some farmers, what they do, because Polish people are Christians, they pray before they eat. Sunday they go to church. So you make sure that you pay attention and listen what they say, how they pray, and you just try to do the same thing. Learn this way, and we lived like farmers, escaping through the whole winter with a farmer. Polish family, the farmer took. And then it was February 1945, after everything quieted down, see some soldiers walking. That's who they are, different uniforms. When they got to the house, we couldn't understand the language they were speaking. As well, we are the Russian army. We liberated you. Couldn't understand. What do you mean? Yeah, there's no more Germans around here. We made sure that the whole area is clean. You can go back to your home, wherever you came from. Believe what we heard. But still my mom say something, she's quiet, not a word. Anything. For a while it's still in this place. make sure that this is true. And then we went back to our house, to our village. Our house was damaged. Basement. And not much better than living in the forest or any place. That somebody will come back, family or somebody. After being in this house for about 2-3 weeks, nobody showed up, nobody back. So my mom said, we cannot stay here. So we moved to a larger town, and that's where we started a new life after the war. So basically, I gave you highlights of our survival during this period of time. By hiding. Later on, we found out people were coming, a few who survived in concentration camps and labor camps. People were so small, so few came back. There were 6 million Jews killed, million not Jews, people killed. Had in his mind based on Aryan society, blonde. He imagined the future. But that we have to learn the history and be aware. Call it leader and a dictator. And again, that's why I devoted my time, my efforts, and everything, and make people aware what happened during this period of time. Sometimes, some kind of symptoms of somebody trying to preach something similar that they can send up. Happen. We're not going to let this to happen. In particular, young people going to schools should be aware of it. The history and know the history. It's too late even started. They should be started a long time ago. To schools, know nothing, most of it, about this period of time. Prevent this from happening again if people don't know the history. When I'm talking, I'm trying to underline human beings. Same. If we Jews, if we Christians, if we Muslims, if we Hindu or whatever religion, it makes no difference if we white, if we black, we brown or anything. We're human beings. That we all, everybody, should stay together, harmony and in peace. We cannot create hatreds between each other, because hatred is going to create more hatred and more hatred, killing each other. Why? What for? We should never, never let those things happen. As we share this, we are aware that our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids will live in peace, in harmony, that we don't have to worry about them. Have to go through what I went through or whoever else survived, are going to be dead. I stop here. Thank you for listening. And
Okay, we have a question already, yes. So for those on Zoom, yes. How have you been able to trust people? I mean, especially after your child, to trust and to be able to live and trust people and teach your children how to trust people. And how can you be grateful or consider being grateful and teach your family to be grateful after everything that you went through?
backwards. And I take example, number one, from my mother, the way she brought me up and my sister, the way she was explaining to us situations. Plus, that there were also people who sacrificed their life during this period of time. I mean, Polish people. Danger as much as us if they would find out that they helped. So when I have my own kids, my grandkids, taught my kids, explaining to them what happened when they came to an age that they could understand, explain to them, and tell them a judgment, who to trust and how much to trust. Involved in any fighting, discussions, or whatever. You can, if you hear something, be nice, talk to the people nice. If you talk to them nice, they may not be so against you. They may change their mind in the way of their thinking. That's the way I felt is the proper way to do. I succeeded because my two daughters, fortunately, grown up the right way, call it. My steps, like you can see one of them here, my other one sometimes with me too. They change, and they try to promote the same ideas for all the people, regardless who they are, what they are. And that's why I say we all should live together.
I'm just going to add to that, that I will say growing up, we definitely were told, be aware of your surroundings. Don't, and nowadays with the kids with the phones, the one thing we were always taught is just be aware of your surroundings. So, and I think that's where the trust came in. It wasn't so much don't trust people, because it was more don't judge people, get to know them first, but be aware of what's going on so that you always know who's around you and what the situation is. So I think that was a little leftover from what they experienced.
Thank you.
And that, yes. So the question is, you mentioned how your father was the head of the Jewish community. What made him the head of the Jewish community? Was something done either by the police or by the community themselves? Like, what gave him that title of head of the Jewish community?
I basically don't have an answer, honestly, because I know only that he was a head of the Jewish community before the Germans came to Poland. So he was already before that. He just continued in this position during this period of time. I don't know if they was elected, he was. Or
I have to tell you, doing research for the book, I actually found references back to the 1800s of the Schonwetter family working closely with the Polish community as the Schonwetter family being representatives of the Jewish people. And because I found a lot of references in old documents about the lack of anti-Semitism that was in this Galicia region of Poland. Because a lot of people say to me about the anti-Semitism in Poland and how Jews were treated in Poland, and we didn't experience that. And so through the research that I did for the book, I was shocked when we found this ancestor of ours from this exact area named Schonwetter, and how closely the communities work together. So I don't know if it was a lineage thing. We're not really sure. We just always knew that he was one of those. Yes. Did you ever find out what happened to your father?
Yes, we did find out what happened. Let me just tell you quick how we found out this. While we were hiding in the forest, and I mentioned that Mr. Piwado, his son-in-law, came, bring us a piece of bread. One day, the son-in-law came in, he's wearing. And she tells him, "Where did you get those shoes? Can you tell me where you got those shoes?" He didn't want to tell her. They were going back and forth. Finally, he says, "If you're insisting, I tell you, but just be calm. Don't make a scenery." I said, "Don't worry about it, just tell me. When you left a week or so after this, 2 weeks, the Germans came with trucks and they asked for Polish men to work. So they load up 2 trucks, they took them to a forest, and they gave us shovels, and there was an outline on the ground, and they told us to dig this big hole there. So we worked, finally they decided that it's proper. They took us back to town. Then they came back a day or so later. "We need you back to work, the people." So they went. We're going back to the same direction. We're going back to the same forest. So when we got there, we looked, this big hole that we were digging out is full with dead people. To cover the whole thing up nicely so there won't be no sign of anything. And then, so they told us, you see the clothing, see all kind of things, because Germans, they were perfect in things. 250 people, men, women, and children. First thing they told them to strip and take all the clothes. The shirts you put here, the pants you put here, the shoes you put here. Then they lined them up. They had machine guns there. And they stood, that, and was it. So he says, I was looking around what to take because they gave us item to take for the work. And I came across the shoes, and I see those shoes. I recognize them because I work with your husband every day. So for the memory, I took the shoes. So now you know that he was killed, and he is in this forest, in this mass grave. That's how we found out what happened to my father.
To add to that, the logo that we use for our foundation has a set of shoes. We had one picture of my grandfather from before the war, and it actually had him standing with the shoes. And those were the actual shoes and the position of his feet that we were able to bring into the logo, because we wanted to remind everyone to walk in each other's footsteps before we make any judgments. That's the whole point, is if you're a kind, respectful person, someone's gonna wanna walk in your footsteps as well. And I talked earlier about finding the goodness in everything. In 2011, someone was hiking in the forest and saw a tiny piece of stone sticking up from the ground. And when they uncovered it, they realized that it was the grave marker for that actual mass grave, and they found it. And it was a pretty heavy piece of stone, so it had to be more than one person, they said, that had come back and marked it, because they didn't want this to ever go without getting discovered. And I could show you a picture later, but they did a whole memorial there. My dad went back, we've gone back, and they've created a whole memorial now where that mass grave is. Do we have any questions online? Okay.
But actually, I have a question. Since you lived in Poland after the war, and you said that there was this nice relationship between the non-Jewish Polish community and the Jewish Polish community, what was life like in Poland after the war, with people who had helped you, but also people who had helped the Nazis and perpetuate.
The question is, what was life like after the war? You lived, you said, in Poland for a while, and so how was it between the Polish Jews and the Polish non-Jews, both those that helped the Jews and those that helped the Nazis? Now they're all living in one community. How was life like that for you after the war?
Well, the life in Poland right after the war, it was to live under the communist regime, because right after the war, Poland, from when the war ended, became a communist nation. That was ruled by the Communist Party. So you know there are certain rules and regulations that they have, and you have to obey by them. So as far as being or anti-anything, you didn't have this because, I don't know, maybe because people were afraid, because the government forbid this. Everybody's supposed to be equal. Rich and everybody was poor. So we all were equal. You see? The war. I mean, right after the war. Mention that because there is a gentleman here whose family came from a town named Łódź. Right after the war, there was right away a pogrom there. It was a shock for people what happened there. But after that, it stopped because again the government, the police wouldn't let any fighting. And of course, religion wasn't allowed to be practiced. You shouldn't practice. Holidays, for example, Jewish holidays in particular, they were not observed because there was no synagogues and people were afraid to go to a synagogue. So, call it as good as it was because we were free and everything, but it was tough to live under the circumstances.
I think one of the things to remember is 90% of the Polish Jewish population was murdered during the war. There weren't that many Jews left. And of those that survived, very few stayed in Poland, very few. And I know right after the war, because on Facebook there's a group, there were a few Jews that came back and were in Tarnów, which is this town that my dad lived in. But very quickly, most of those children were not in the school anymore. They left. And so I know we've spoken growing up, he was the only Jewish kid, and he's great. There were no other Jews. It wasn't, so it wasn't about him being Jewish. There just was no one else besides him. So there was, like you said, no religion. I used to ask him, like, what did you do for a bar mitzvah? What did you do this? Because there was none. A couple of men took me to their basement, gave me tefillin. They gave me a shot of vodka. They said, all right, now you're a man. So like that was about the extent of it. It was like hidden behind curtains. And he tells me during the communist regime, I remember he told me about, you know, they couldn't even listen to the radio, and they used to hide behind the thing, and it was free, what is it, Free Europe?
Radio Free Europe.
And they used to hide very quietly just to listen to the radio so they could listen to music. So I think it's just a life that none of us could really understand or conceptualize, so. Yes?
First, thank you very much for doing this. It's a super basic question. What year was Mark born? And how old was his mother when he was born? I'm just trying to get a timeline with it. She sounds like she must have been like an amazingly strong woman. What happened to her after the war?
So when were you born and when was grandma born, just to get a timeline. So my grandmother, so my dad was born in the early 30s, 1933, so he was only like 5 or 6 when the war started. And my grandmother actually when I say just, we were so lucky, we had her until 2002 when she was 94 years old. So after the war, they went to Israel, as you heard, and my father came to America, but my grandmother and aunt stayed in Israel. So when they left in 57, my dad and my grandmother had already started studying in the university. My dad was studying to be a lawyer, and my aunt was studying to be a dentist, orthodontist. And when they had to leave and they went to Israel, there was no money. They couldn't both go back to school, so my dad took the role on as, okay, I'm gonna go work, and he had my aunt finish her schooling, and she became a doctor and orthodontist in Israel for many years, and my whole family's in Israel now, so we're here. And my grandmother was one of 9 children. 4 of them had come to America in the early 1900s, 1908, 1912. And so after the war, my grandmother was the only one that had survived out of the whole family. And the sisters and one brother, they were able to reconnect. And that's how my dad came to America, is because his aunts and an uncle were here, and they sponsored and brought him over. So that's when I said a lot of my family here didn't know his story. Those are my cousins that came from my grandmother's side of the family that they knew he was from Europe and that he was in some war, but they really didn't understand what he had gone through. So I don't know how we're doing on time or if we're... Is there any other questions? Okay. All right, I think we're good. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much.
So just as a token of our thanks, we have some gifts for you.
Thank you so
For being
much.
here, and as well as a donation to the Mark Schonwetter
Thank you so
thank you.
very
Holocaust
much.
Foundation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. And I think, as you mentioned, the book will be available
Yes.
at the dessert for anyone who would like to purchase.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much
Thank
for
Thank
being
you
here.
all so very much.
and
And
sharing
those
your
on
story.
Zoom, thank you all those on
Thank you
Zoom.
on Zoom. Thank you
Thanks.
for being here, and please join us, those here, for
Absolutely.
some dessert.
Thank you.
Thank